Our today's topic is prevention and cure. We have a saying in English, prevention is better than cure. And this saying belongs to the previous generation. A century rolled after this saying was given. And due to certain social pressures and economic pressures and political pressure, we are now in such a stage as to change the saying and say that cure is better than prevention, because we have no time to prevent things. What we want is a timely and quick cure, so that we may be immediately made fit to attend to our compulsory routine once again. This is not your fault, not my fault. We need not feel ashamed of this, but it is due to a change in the social structure of all nations. The individuals of any nation are not at all responsible for this change, but to reconstruct the human society once again from such a structure to a more desirable structure. It is always the individuals who are responsible for anything unfortunate occurring to humanity. It's not the individuals who are responsible. The trend of things is responsible. But to set up once again a new tradition and to prove once again that the human being is a creator of his own future, it is the individuals and not any institutions that are responsible. Because desirable activity starts with individuals, and then its desirability stimulates some more individuals into action, and then there will be a network of desirable activity, and there will be a formation of groups in the four corners of the globe, and then great institutions develop. What I mean to say is, first we should begin to work on an individual level, and then work should take its own shape through our effort. And after some work has been channelized by individuals, then there will be a necessity of institutions, and the necessity should drive for the formation of institutions. Then only such institutions form a network of institutions, and there will be one composite institution for some time to come. The opposite direction, that is, first of all, forming a big institution and then making gatherings and seminars and beginning to think what we should do and plan, that is a negative way of approach. It ends in nothing but a formation and a dissolution of institutions. So let us make a loud thinking once again that prevention is better than cure. How we have to prevent diseases is the more important aspect than to know how to cure diseases. Ayurveda uses a grand and positive dimension about this matter. Do you know how the first textbook of Ayurveda begins? It begins with a narrative that there was a hermitage in a forest, and the hermitage consisted of 12 houses, and there were 12 groups of families existing in the hermitage. And the master who is leading the hermitage, who was a great saint and a sage, he was teaching the way of life to his disciples one morning. The sun was fresh and the atmosphere was most illuminating. When a group of friends and classmates of that master came there, and he welcomed them and asked where from they were coming. They said they were coming from big cities. They mentioned the names of some big cities in those centuries. In our language, they said, one of them said he was coming from Munich, another from Paris, another from London, another from Brazil. Then he said, that's the reason why you are like this. I hope you all know the daily routine of a healthy man. I hope you follow the routine prescribed for a healthy man. But still, I find you pale and unhealthy. You are sweating and you are gasping. And your faces are not glowing with the radiance of health. I request you to stay here with me for 1 month. Eat the food we eat. Drink the water and fruit juices we drink. Take physical and mental exercises along with us. Follow what we do daily, so that there may be less teaching and more practicing. In the meanwhile, I will be teaching a few things also. Then they accepted, and he began his teaching. This is how the opening pages of the first book of Ayurveda start in Sanskrit. And then he began his teaching. Is there not a dire necessity in the cities to preserve foods and eat? For example, if you live a village life like us, having village units with less number of houses and more number of villages, we have no necessity to preserve our foods, because we take legumes from the tree direct, we pluck fruits from the plants direct, we take milk and yogurt, everything direct, and we have no need to preserve them and eat them. This is one reason why people in city life go into diseases. And this is the one reason why the village life is not full of diseases. This is his first day's lesson. And he gave examples of using white and clean polished rice. He called it the excrete of food. In Sanskrit, it is called Anna Mala. Anna means food, Mala means excrete. Polished rice is called excreta of food, because the food content belongs to the brown coating of rice. And all the cereals should be carefully eaten fresh. And then many of the cereals and lentils to be eaten with the seed cover, not to be polished before cooked. If you do it, the need of medicines will not be there much. That is the first lesson he gave.
Just that.
And then he gave the second lesson. Pickles should not be eaten. Pickles. Dehydrated foods should not be eaten. Yes, the water content taken away to preserve them. And he described various forms of dead foods, and he named it as corpse eating. This is the second day's lesson he has given. We can add to that the frozen foods also, because chemically they are not spoiled and biochemically they are not spoiled, but vitally they are spoiled. They are dead. For example, a corpse can be preserved for any number of days when frozen. That does not mean that Mr. So-and-so is still living and smiling. Same way with foods also. If some fruits or legumes are preserved for 1 or 2 or 3 weeks, or if some unfortunate eggs preserved for 3 or 4 weeks, with the chick inside performing penitence and yoga. We can't claim that we are eating scientifically hygienic food. We can eat, no doubt, we have the independence and privilege to eat whatever we want, but we have to feel ashamed and accept that we are doing an unscientific thing. This is the second and third lessons he has given. And then about fresh and natural foods, he has described the more frequent use of juicy fruits and green legumes more than the proteined foods, that is, more than heavy foods like potatoes and beans of various types. Make green legumes and leaves and juicy fruits more frequent. That is what he advised. I think many of you have gone through the books of the Tibetan master Jwalkol. You will find the same sentences in English language. And also it seems Jwalkol personally likes the taste of oranges because he has described the hygienic use of oranges in more sentences than others. And then after describing other hygienic foods, he once again writes, above all, oranges. So he has made a third time stress about oranges in his books. That does not mean Jwalkol is too much fond of oranges, but that means they give such a wealth of health. This is one lesson he has given. And he said, wash your body at least daily once from head to foot in running water. Running not from the taps, but in a river or a spring or a canal. I know we laugh at it. I know we laugh at our laughing can be called sour grapeism. Sour grapes. A fox saw grapes at a height and wanted to catch them. It jumped and jumped. It could not reach. And it said, after all, these grapes are sour, we should not eat them. That is what is called sour grapeism. We know that we cannot get river water because we have enough contaminated rivers. Many of the rivers in the world are man-spoiled and man-contaminated. For your information, no other species of biological beings can contaminate rivers like this. The fishes and other beings in the rivers, while living in the rivers, they purify the water of the river. Whereas the presence of the human fellow always proves detrimental and contagious to other beings as well as to himself. Wherever human beings are crowded and grouped, they eat away all the sources and resources of nature. And also, we cannot claim any practical use to any of the beings or nature. Excuse me, this is a loud thinking of my personal point of view. But if anyone finds a satisfactory answer to this, I want to know it. And I think you know, Bernard Shaw remarked that men laugh because they cannot weep. So we laugh at such things because we cannot manage. But there comes a generation, the next generation, who can manage such things. Let us not believe that we are the modern fellows. We grow old and we have grown old. And there will be the next generation who is foolish enough to call themselves modern, just as we called ourselves modern. But at least they will be better than our generation. They can achieve certain things which we laughed at. This is my hope about the future humanity. And then he taught, let there be more intake of water along with the food. we ask, is it not unhealthy to have more intake than required? Exactly so. But the paraphrase of this statement is that from the quantity of liquid we take in daily, there is a necessity to reduce things like coffee and tea and more costly liquids. For example, the Savior coming on white horse, you will find the picture on the bottle. Savior on the white horse with a drawn sword, long ago described in St. John's Revelation. Better to avoid all such troublesome liquids. Let them be replaced by pure water from running river. That is what the master of Ayurveda means. The next lesson he has given is practice the art of eating. It's not good to practice the labor of eating or the battle of eating. Better to practice the art of eating. Just as the master says, the art of healing. Dr. Frederick Hahnemann says, we have to stop with the process of curing with too much medicine. We have to practice the art of healing. Master Jwalkol recommends the art of healing. Everything in life, including death, should be practiced as an art. I think you know that there is a chapter, a peculiar chapter in the book Esoteric Healing. The heading is The Art of Dying. Not to die a horrible death, but be aesthetic, to drop off the body without any strain. So, be an artist in everything. So the master of Ayurveda says, practice the art of eating. The first principle of the art of eating is, stop eating when you still feel a little bit that you want to eat. There is much truth in this statement. Please reconsider it. I will repeat this sentence. At every meal, whether it be lunch or dinner or a banquet, you stop your process of eating when you still feel like eating some more thing. That means you should not eat more than the point of satiation. That is the first principle of the art of eating. Second thing he prescribes is, divide your food materials into two groups, strong foods and easily digestible foods. Don't make strong foods as regular features of your daily meal. You can take it once in a week or twice in a week. For example, if I want to eat a full cock, I can eat once in a week. Not to daily fight with the cock. And the other type of foods, that is green leaves and legumes, fruits and fruit juices, milk and yogurt, sour cream. Let them be regular features of your diet. Not even butter, he says. You add butter to the other group of foods. All oils and fats, except sesame oil and coconut oil, the equivalent for which in the Occident can be called sunflower oil or sometimes olive oil. We can find equivalents as far as possible. Instead of animal oils, make a frequent use of vegetable oils and make an unfrequent use of animal oil. And whenever you eat rich foods like a cock or meat or eggs or roots like potato, etc., then eat 2/3 of your consumable quantity. And whenever you eat the foods of the first group, you can enjoy a full meal, stopping while still feeling that you want to eat something more. And then he says, there are seasons and their effects upon you. Let there be a music-like tuning and modulation of the foods according to the season. Know the nature of seasons and make a slight change of the frequently used items. And then he goes into the details of the seasons and the changes that occur in the body due to seasons. Then he enumerates the stages of our life according to our age. He discusses what is good for a baby, what is good for an infant, what is good for a growing boy, what is good for a youth, what is good for middle-aged man, what is good to a man approaching old age, and then what is good in old age. So he divides the whole span of life into 7 equal parts and suggests the modulations of food according to age. And finally, as a general rule, he says, as long as your body is growing, live by eating more and more good foods. And from the age when the growth stops, learn to live by not eating. That is, by eliminating the various types of foods gradually. So during the first stage, learn to live by eating. During the second stage, learn to live by not eating. That does not mean fasting and starving, because he gives the fundamental principles of every eating in the following manner. First principle is, if you measure your belly before and after eating, there should not be a difference.
Sollte es keinen Unterschied geben.
He says, for a healthy man, don't be foolish to believe that there will be a difference in the size of the belly after eating. The difference starts only when you begin to grow unhealthy. The second thing is, the shape of your hypochondria should not change after eating. And you should be able to walk after lunch and after dinner. And daily you should continue to make it a practice to walk after dinner and after lunch. And let the breathing be as comfortable after eating as it was before eating. I am just translating his sentences. If there is something insulting, excuse me, I am not responsible. And then he says,